Hey, it's Stu, and this is going to be a book review video. It's my first book review video upon my return from the summer, and um, I thought about this particular video, like what I would say in it, way more than I ever have before. Historically, in the 6 months that I've been making videos, mostly for myself and a few other folks, right? I have been quite spontaneous. This is not something I understand. I'm so late to the game, like on BookTube, that there's no way it's going to be like a thing for me. I also understand that I read anything I get my hands on, and where that's its own niche. Let me correct. I'm reading books only sourced through Little Free Libraries, Friends of the Library, Books Hills, or other thrift shops. And I'm not as discerning as I would be if I were out buying or even picking the book that I want to read from the library. I shuffle in recommendations either by other booktubers or by friends or even my library, bookstore owners, whatever. But mostly it's just opportunistic, kind of voracious reading for leisure, which is happening right now. When I was reading over the summer, I didn't make TBRs. I had a giant pile of possibilities, which I've heard other people say, so please don't let me take your hashtag if that's what it is. But I had a giant selection of possible books, and I was also really open to, if somebody else was reading something, I would say, what are you reading? They would tell me about it. This happened on several occasions. I looked it up. Is there a Spanish or English version? Because a couple of times folks were reading in French or German. And put it on a hold if that's so. If I ran into a situation where I found in like the bookshelf at a hostel or hotel a book that I didn't want to carry around with me, I just went ahead and put it on hold, and my Libby shelf likewise. And so there were books that I started and then I was like, nah, not working for me now. And then the hold notice came, or the book's about to renew, and I renewed it or I put it on hold again. And there are books that I was like, sat there and I just didn't get to, and they just disappeared. I understand probably that's how a lot of people's Libby shelves work, and not me. Normally, if it's there, I'm going to read it or attempt to. And then there were books that I started and then knew that, this situation or wherever I was, the mood, the vibe I was in the current and travel wasn't going to align with this book. So I, again, just kind of let them go for later, and then did pick them up and read them later. Very much a different sort of scenario than picking a week or so. Picking a set of books and say, these are the books you will be reading until you're done reading these books, and then you can pick other books. I really grooved with that last year, and I'm going to try it again this year. But what happened was I didn't really pick a prompt that was thoughtful. It was kind of just, here's stuff that's left on the summer group of possible books to read, and let me just kind of try to clean it up. I had a kind of cleanup vibe going, and therefore I wasn't being thoughtful around anything around what, if it was the prompt gonna tie books together, was it gonna be meaningful? Why would I even pick these 5, 6, 7 books in a row, etc. I struggled with many of these books in ways that I wonder if, like in summer reading or in a different reading situation, I wouldn't have just been like, nah, right? There is some gratification in finishing a book, even though you don't like it. There is some value in saying, let me find the virtues, even though I'm sort of like overwhelmed with what doesn't work for me in this book. So I think that's useful, but I only think it's useful like every once in a while when there's more than one book in a row like that. You start to take, like, your reading self, your reading persona starts to take it quite personally. this is the reflection that I said in previous videos was coming. Like, I need to reflect on it. I've since redirected. I've picked a prompt. The prompt is that I've already thought about that, talked about that, even published that as a video. The prompt is books with trees on the front, kind of trying to get into a fall vibe, trying to get into a variety of reading that sort of makes sense. And also put a huge caveat in my mind, like, if this book isn't working, I have so many books right now, I just need to let it go. I think I'm only going to reshelf it and say, oh, for later. Although there were like 2 occasions of that last year where that's all it needed, was just to kind of need to read this book in a different headspace. It's okay. I have so many books, physical copies of books in my own personal library that I've gotten for free or very cheap, that get it back out there. If it comes back around, great. Because I do. Like, I'm in the situation now where I'm seeing a lot of the books that I've already read back out in the little free library system. Not even necessarily the one that I put out there. Somebody else put it out there, or in the Friends of the Library bookshops, etc. So I just want to say that out loud. I want to hear myself say that out loud, so that my next reading journey doesn't include the kind of discomfort that I'm not willing to put into reading based on the goals that I have for reading right now. Let's get into the books that I read in the last 10 days. I think it took me 10 days to read these books. The time mark isn't important. It felt better to say something tangible right there than like since I made the last video, because that's not even true. Anyway, Elizabeth Berg, We Are All Welcome Here. What happened with this was, I knew I wanted a book to read with my eyes in case listening wasn't going to work. And I was already in the middle of a listening book, which I'm going to talk about towards the end of this video. And I went to my summer, tag label, as any of us that use Libby know what I'm talking about, my summer label. And this was on it. I actually didn't read it on the plane, and I read it like I was so not well when I came home. I couldn't read. I couldn't even, I don't even think I could listen. I didn't have any concentration because I was so unwell. And it just wasn't something to try to force myself to do. As soon as I felt well enough, I read this book in a sitting. Of course, this is a small book. Elizabeth Berg has written several books, quite a bit. And so this is my introduction to her work. She's one of those New York Times best-selling authors. She was also on the Oprah's book club in 2000. So, 20 some years ago or more, 20 to 30 years ago, she was kind of that author that if BookTube existed, booktubers would have been talking about. I can see why. I liked her writing style. She lives in Chicago. And I appreciate that where people live and or work and or are from impacts how they tell stories. So I wanted to tell a little of her story, which is often on the back cover of books. This book is I also read the author's note, which I love. I'm going to sidebar again. And this story came to her by a woman that said, I want to tell you about my mother. And if you want to write a book about it, I'd like that. And Elizabeth Berg was like, I'm going to write a book about it. Tell me as much as possible. I'll do my research, but it's not going to be a biographical story of her mother. It's going to be fictionalized. However, the synopsis of your mother's life, with your permission, I will use on this book. And that is this. This is a woman who got polio, and I think that's relevant. This is now contemporary relevance as we do away with vaccines, perhaps, as a part of a cultural phenomenon. And I think one very arguably very positive impact of vaccine is polio. So this woman had polio. She was pregnant with polio. She was put in an iron lung. She had the actual woman, the mother that I was telling you about, but the fictionalized woman in this story, the character of the story. And she miraculously had a baby while in an iron lung. As a result of what polio did to her body, she could only move her head and needed full care, and chose to raise her daughter they wanted to take her daughter away, and she chose to raise her daughter. And she raised her daughter in this physical condition fully well. So this book, of course, looks at ableism, but only kind of slightly. It very much is told from the daughter's point of view. Yeah, which I appreciated. I thought that was a great point of view from which to tell this story. I imagine it's because it was the daughter kind of telling the story to Elizabeth Berg. And, you know, the daughter, of course, had moments when she wished her life would be different. And not to minimize anyone's life story, but haven't we all? However, very much loved her mother, thought her mother did a great job. Again, that's the insight into ableism. There's some look, this takes place in the South. So there's some look at racial tensions because this is taking place during civil rights protests. And it had a bit it had some Harper Lee vibe feel to it. Relevant because I'm about to read Harper Lee's book. And yeah, I said more about this book than any other book. It was a decent book. I read it in a sitting. I would recommend it. If this book, you come upon this book the way that I did, yeah, it was worth reading the way I came upon it and the way I read it. Oprah's book selection was Open House, yeah. And she also won, so not this one, and she won a couple of awards for a couple of her other books as well in the 90s. If I came across this author again in a little free library as one of my free or cheap books in the book sale, I would definitely read Elizabeth Berg again. I can't say as much for Lisa C. This is my second Lisa C. book. I came in with a little bit of a negative attitude. I haven't read Snowflower and the Secret Fan, which I'm to understand is her most acclaimed, beloved, or either maybe just liked, because acclaim might be too strong of a word for this author. The first book that I read of hers, whose name I've totally blanked out, and I'm not doing the editing where I'm going to put it up there. One day maybe I will, but I wanted to like, and I didn't like it. I liked the premise. I even liked the setup, but the writing was, in my opinion, which I, could defend if I needed to, if I were doing a literary analysis, right? Which I'm not now. So this is just, these are videos about my opinions, was so poor. It distracted me. It absolutely just distracted me from, it was Peony in Love, by the way, distracted me from the story. This book is set up with three separate characters. And those 3 points of view which are divided into characters. All are told from the first person. I feel like this choice as an author, it already is something that you would do sort of as an amateurish choice. That's my opinion, but also it's setting yourself up for a whole lot that you might not be able to deliver. I think that you had better be able to create 3 different really deeply personal character development inner voices if you want to do first person 3 different times. And she didn't do that. Like if I would have flipped and you would have covered which character this was, I wouldn't have been able to tell you this is clearly Grace talking, or this is Ruby. I couldn't, like, literally it was the same person in the writing style. So that was my first sort of annoyance. Plenty of other, I don't need to say. The premise of this book is 3 women in San Francisco of Chinese and Japanese descent, but American-born women who are trying to make it in sort of a showbiz type scenario, facing racism, facing sexism, and finally facing the situation which happened in World War II era, where Japanese were deemed enemies of the state and put in internment camps. So this book confronts some historical realities. And I think even the way in which it confronts it is useful. Again, like Peony in Love, the writing took me out of the story so much that I really couldn't enjoy it. I barely tolerated it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, obviously this is a bestseller. Somebody else really likes this book. This is not about you. And also I've not published a New York Times best-selling book. So, I understand Lisa C maybe deserves her flowers in some regard. But for me as a reader, I won't be reading another book probably by this author unless it's just sitting there and there's no other books to read. And hopefully it's the Sunflower and the Secret fan so that I can give the book that she's known for a better chance. The last thing I'm going to say about this book is it does briefly discuss domestic violence. And I absolutely 100% do not like and feel, even me myself can see. No, I feel offended. I feel offended by the presentation and resolution and handling of domestic violence in this book. I was already having issues. I wasn't going to give it a whole lot of grace anyway, but that would have stood out to me. Even if I was really liking the story, that in itself would have been, I can't really say that I would recommend this book then. Next, The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared. This is another book, and this is by Jonas Johannesson, and this is, I believe, in translation. Yeah, so but the translator is Rod Bradbury. The original language is Swedish. This is another book that I really wanted to like, and did for the first quarter or third of the book. If I were to make the connection that, like, sort of for me and anybody that knows me would make sense. This is basically Forrest Gump-esque in that we have the hero, the unlikely hero's journey, who meets all of these really known to many people because of the way that history has been told, historical figures and events. And they could be known to people even at the way that history is told, but it's still very much aligning with the historical institutional way that history has been told. And he meets them, and then very much like Forrest Gump, it's just kind of like this naive human that sort of pontificates a worldview that in this case suggests that not being political and just being human, and or there's no meritocracy structure in this world. This book wouldn't have per se been for me. I wanted to like it, but then its absurdity just became too drawn out. It was too absurd. I found myself being more critical, especially for a leisure read, on actually the messages it was trying to send, clearly realizing I wasn't its readership. And finally, I think, and I'm going to get into this a little later, I think things are so absurd, at least how I'm perceiving them in the world around me right now. I think this kind of absurdity, I would have had a lot more patience or interest or been entertained by in a different time. But when I engage with life outside of literary fiction, deliberate absurdity, and it's absurd, I find reading the absurd maybe less entertaining. Maybe I need a break from absurdity. Along came the book that changed everything. The author, who, this is maybe my third read by this author, who I will stand by, and a book that I absolutely adored. So in this reading stretch, I am so happy that this book landed even as a cleanup, because I don't know when it would have. And there were so many aspects of this book that, most importantly, the writing in this book, that redeemed me as a reader, and the kind of reader that I am right now. This is Louise Erdrich. No, it's Erdrich. Yeah. And Erdrich. Yeah. I looked up how to say the name. I was talking about this author with a friend the other day, and I've been saying ch, which would make sense. And they corrected. They said, I think it's k. And so I, did that thing that we do. I used Google or generative AI and said, how do you pronounce this author's name? So Louise Erdrich is an American icon author. If you're doing lists of great contemporary American authors and you're not including this author, ask yourself, why? Have you read her? And why would it be that she is or is not making the list? From your own personal opinion, you can think outside your personal opinion too, but that would be the challenge. Now, it's not like she's not known in the literary critic world. This book, as you can see, has one of those stickers on it. So it's the winner of the National Book Critics Award for Fiction. This book was not the most amazing book I ever read. I have to understand that in the context that I was reading, which was meh, nah, what? Right? Like, I can understand that no matter how you read, whatever you're reading before and after influences how you experience it, what's going on in your life, influences how you experience the book, the story, the characters, the setting, the messages the author is trying to send. This is a domestic fiction. It is about a family. One family loses a child, and it is indeed the accidental, however real, responsibility or fault of a man and a woman who take their child, then take their son of the same age to the other family, who's also related, the women are stepsisters, to the other family, and say, because of the fault, you can now raise our son. And then there's every kind of impact of if that. I love the way this book, sidebar, obviously I'm going off on a tangent now, anyone who's listened to me knows, explores even the sense of justice, and does it work? And when we play with what justice means and its real impact when it's delivered or not delivered on the humans involved, up into including, and I love the way this looks at the sisters. There are sisters in both families, the brothers, the husband, the wife, the priest who's there, who's interjected to talk about eternal and make existential meaning somewhat on some of this, but also to introduce this tension and conflict and dialogue between tradition and colonial or colonization and the ideals and ideas that come with it. I loved the characters in this book. It was so refreshing to have characters that were developed. And I kept thinking, like, what is my girl Louise doing, in not that much time and with subtlety that these other authors just couldn't and didn't do? Like, then I was like, okay, now I'm getting really into like literary criticism, and I don't need to write a literary essay. I'm just reading for leisure. And I'm giving this book up because it is my commitment right now. One day, if I ever have a place where it's like my, for as long as I can predict, place. I will own the whole collection, I hope, of this author, and this beautiful book. I love this cover, but I want to own it in hardback. So that's what I'm manifesting for my future. In the meantime, I got this out of a little free library. I even know which little free library I got it out of. I want to put this back into a little free library, and I want someone to find this book. This is my hope for this exact copy of this book, to find this book and to feel the way that I did about how characters and meaning are made through authorship, and be like, wow, yeah, this, my friends, is a good and meaningful book. And also maybe to be introduced to this author if they're not, and say, let me Google up this author. Oh, they've written a lot of books. Oh, they've gotten some awards. Why don't I read this author as one of my American modern classics? That's what I want for that book. Next is a book that was like super hyped. And I know this because of the amount that I see this book everywhere. I also know this kind of like because I hear about this book even still. I was trepidatious to read this book. Like, I had trepidation because I had already been like, I don't know, hyped best-selling authors. Like, maybe that's just not my vibe. Maybe I need something that's more in this vein, where I can really get on board with characters. I don't necessarily need the full tragedy, and because this is tragic and beautiful. You know, I'm not trying to say that I can't handle something lighthearted, but I'm thinking like lighthearted, like what you need is in this library, not like works that are poorly written, or just popular because of reasons of things that get popular, which have their merit, but don't necessarily resonate with me, especially in the time and place. Anyway, this is Maria Semple's Where Did You Go, Bernadette? Let me tell you, this is a fun read. I don't know, and I've said this multiple times, like epistolatory novels written through letters. I mean, there's some great ones out there, but I think even in The American Marriage, like, I fell out of the story. I started to get sort of critical, like, is it very clear who's writing this letter? Why did we choose a letter? In that book, it was quite obvious because the choices were right. But in this book, like, I really appreciate, again, now we have sandwich from the front and the back, a story told through the eyes of a teenage child. And in both cases, in Elizabeth Berg's and in Where Did You Go, Bernadette, the child is of similar age. She's a female. I appreciated the setting of this book. I really could get on board. I appreciated some of the social commentary, albeit I feel a bit tired. And I'm like, I understand that the social commentary around people of affluence behaving in a kind of way still should sort of exist. But I don't know. I was just like, like I said, a bit tired. I thought a lot of the choices that the author made really worked for this book. I was a little sad that I felt like the mother, the main character, Bernadette, really could have been developed in a way that was more, substantive, maybe sophisticated, had the author made other choices. But then would this book have gotten the hype? Maybe not, right? Like, I need to honor that being the, best-selling contemporary author. Maybe I think it went on to make a show. Like, it's a lot. It equates to a lot of success for authors. So I want to appreciate that. I think that Maria, I think, this is my thoughts, and I have reasons to think, but I won't go into that Maria Semple actually could have written a way more sophisticated book. And she made her choices. Some of the places she goes in this book, some of the social commentary does become pretty substantive. But then it sort of like backs off, or there's these choices like there are some places where it just doesn't work after I said there are things that work. For example, so let me give you a little of the synopsis. There's a mom, Bernadette. There's a young girl. We call her B. She's telling the story intermittently, but then there's a lot of emails, letters, faxes that are happening between the other characters. So that's why it's a, epistolary novel. Am I saying that? Anyway, okay. So there's a case when the father is writing a psychiatrist on pen and paper because his technology isn't working. So he's like, oh, I need to write this by hand. And the way in which he's telling the story to the psychiatrist serves the plot, but didn't feel authentic. So these are the kinds of corners that you put yourself in, I think, as an author, and trying to write like this, like through letters, etc. Yeah, it was an interesting choice. Did it make it a page turner? Sure. Would I have enjoyed this story told perhaps differently more? Or would I have found it, maybe I enjoyed more, I don't know, found it more substantive and sophisticated? Yes. I found myself mostly enjoying this book. I would still say kind of meh, right? Like, will I remember this book forevermore? Will I want to read this book again? Probably not. But also, I can accept that there are plenty of books like that out there. That's actually kind of what reading for leisure is. And so I can accept that. I didn't find myself out of the story very much in this book. I believe it's still popular. I think once I pop this into a Little Free Library, it'll make its circulations, because I see it all of the time in Little Free Library videos, but also in the Little Free Libraries around me. This is a local author, so I think this book still has a lot of potential to be really, like, somebody's going to recognize it and want to take it. And then if that's what helps them kind of jump into reading and explore reading, then great. Like, first and foremost, promote literacy and reading. Finally, Ghost Lover by Lisa Taddeo. I read part of the first story. I liked her writing. I couldn't super get into it. I remembered by then that the criticisms that I had read, and I rarely, like, the reason that I looked up this book when I hauled it is because I got it at the 10 books for $5. And I wanted to sort of like be more discerning. I didn't want to just haul all of these books, which I think I'm going to go do today under the same guise. Like, I will just take the couple of books that I think I'd really like to read, things that I'm questionable about. I just want to put out into Little Free Libraries. And I'm really happy even today to pick up books that I've read before and liked and make sure that they're distributed out into Little Free Libraries. So that's how I came to read the criticism of this book. I put it in the, maybe this goes out to Little Free Libraries. And then I thought, you know what, let me put it on the summer pile. And if it's short stories, if it comes around in the summer and I read it, great. If not, I'll unhaul it. So then its third round, it was like, let me put it in this reading, clean up the summer pile reading. By the time I went through all of the things that I've gone through, which I've just outlined in this video, I was able to think more critically around the criticisms around this book. And it is such that the characters in this book are body and weight fixated, are worried about attracting and or getting men. Like, this is that kind of a romance, like what it's like to get a man. And I am highly critical of my own self when I start thinking like that. I'm critical of that as a social paradigm through a feminist lens. And I got, like I said, halfway into the first story. I didn't fall into it that much. I liked her writing. Critics, by the way, I use Goodreads. I have not agreed with Goodreads on many occasions, so I want to be careful to not just discredit something that I might like, but those reviews were well written, well defended, and also something that maybe influenced but also affirmed once I kind of got in, like, nah, this isn't for me. This isn't for me right now. I don't want to read about women worried about their, like, whose the conflict in the story is I need to lose weight and I need to get a man. I think that I'm distilling that down a little too much. However, that's where I'm at with this. I'm not going to read it. It's on my Libby shelf. If I feel any kind of guilty, it's not on hold, so I can have it there till it goes away and say, hey, these are short stories. I made it through one. Or part of one. Let me try to read another. But as far as the physical copy, it's going in the unhaul pile. I don't think, to be fair, that I'm unhauling books this weekend. I think I'm going to that 10 for $5 St. Vincent de Paul scenario. And I'm going to leave the unhaul, I think, some unhaul. I've got quite a few books here. For next week, I'm not taking them to the Friends of the Library in this volume because they were completely overwhelmed this week. So this means little free libraries, and it kind of maybe means me driving around on a weekend adventure and going to ones that I haven't been to in a while, or even ones that I love, and putting books that maybe I didn't love, but at least that are popular, they're in good condition, and or books that I loved in there. I wanted to say this book, which I started listening to, this is a carryover for summer read. It's going to take me a while to listen to. I just haven't been well enough to walk that much. And I only took the bus one time last week to commute to work, where I did get more listening in. And those are the cases when I listen to books. This is Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Water Dancers. This is a fantastic listen. This book, I knew after I kind of hit a slump that I needed to find a way to listen and even read with my eyes, but I have experienced it going in and out like that, like hybriding it like that doesn't work for me. This is a great listen. I am about a quarter of the way through this book now. I'm actually kind of on a place where there's a cliffhanger, like there's some drama happening, and I was okay with leaving it there for later so that I can anticipate getting back into the story. So this is characters, but this is also plot, because look at me hanging there. I also want to let you know that I started my Trees and the Lost story by Meg Schaefer. I started this in the middle of the night. I had a little of insomnia, and it was such a good little, like an adult fairy tale based on Narnia. Was the right way. There's some criticisms I can come up right from the beginning. However, I can suspend them because that felt good. Like getting into this story felt good, like in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. So I'm also quite pleased that I made this switch to something that, like, to a reading prompt that felt more intentional, and a little less sort of exploratory than what was going on in summer reading. So just, stay tuned for the review video that's coming, because probably both of those books will be on it. Stay tuned for a haul video. If I do end up going to the St. Vincent de Paul that has 10 books for $5, there will be a haul video with some discussion of what I'm going to put on my shelf and what's going out to little free libraries.